Welcome. Let's take a moment to once again reestablish a good motivation for our time together. It's a great opportunity to check your mind. So, not only adding some mindfulness in of like, how's my mind right now? What's happening? You may have been really great this morning, earlier today, and then you notice this afternoon you're tired or something else agitated your mind, or you were having some trouble this morning and now the mind feels better. So have a moment, just lightly close your eyes and allow yourself to check in as you begin to deepen your respiration. And just notice what is going on right now with your mind in a non-judgmental, spacious way. You're just observing. And from this place, whatever we observe, if it's a negative thing that we feel is coming up, we can adjust that with our motivation by setting a positive motivation. If we're having a positive experience arise in our mind, we can further enhance that by setting a positive motivation. And just think about the advantage we have now to spend an hour, at least an hour of the day, focused on something that will help us shift negative emotions to something more positive. And if we're having a more positive experience in our minds, that has a reverberation to anyone around you, any energy around you, particularly people around you, to have a positive influence or effect on them. So, the real purpose in the Mahayana tradition that everything's focused on is benefiting all living beings, all sentient beings, beings with a mind or consciousness. The best way we can do it is as a fully enlightened being, a Buddha. So, again, if that's interesting to you, something you would like to move towards, include that in your motivation right now. Just take a moment to set that intention for our time together and all the activities of the rest of your day. Bring your awareness to your breath right now, a normal, natural breath. We were focused on the clarity of consciousness the last couple of weeks, focusing on the sky, clear, expansive, luminous sky that is like the mind, focusing on the clear mountain lake that is like the mind, helpful coping mechanisms to anxiety and depression and negative emotions. And let's right now look at the breath for a moment. Another great coping mechanism is the breath, deepening the respiration when you get anxious. Take a deep breath in right now. Really feel it filling the body, expanding your consciousness. And then at your own pace, slowly let it go, releasing any tension you feel you're holding in the body and mind as you exhale. And as you do this, begin to look at your posture, how you're sitting, making sure the spine is as extended as possible and that the body is generally comfortable. If you're in a chair, the feet are flat on the floor or on a cushion on the floor. The legs are uncrossed if you're seated in a chair. If you're seated in a cushion, no problem. In both instances, on a cushion or in a chair, feel the grounding. First with your seat and the floor that is ultimately connected to the base of your room, your house, your apartment, connected to the earth, supported by the earth. And if you'd like, feel the roots from the earth coming up under your feet, not holding you down in a leaden way, supporting you to allow your own branches to spread, flower, and flourish. That grounding is always there for you, should you choose to focus on it, to remember it, especially in times of anxiety or the mind severely distracted, severely agitated. Come back to the ground and the support from Mother Earth, the deepening of the breath. The breath is always happening automatically. So allow the breath, in a sense, to breathe you. Instead of you breathing, you wondering, am I doing it right? Am I focused on the breath? I forgot the breath. I'm over here with this thought. Let all that go. Let the thoughts arise like bubbles floating off into space. I can choose not to follow them for a moment and just let the breath breathe you. Feel the lungs expanding. Just be there with that experience. Don't worry if the mind wanders at times. Just feel your body alive, breathing with each breath. Now let's also look at how we pick up sound in our lives. Sound through the ears, obviously. Now we may live in very quiet, still places, but as if your ears were these elaborate satellites, okay, these dishes that are picking up sound in your environment. Okay, just sit right now, receive the vibrations if you can. There's no need to label or like or dislike any of it. I just want you to observe. And this is the awareness level of the mind. So we looked at clarity for a couple of sessions, the clarity aspect of the mind. The mind has another characteristic in Tibetan Buddhism. It's aware. It knows things. You don't have to focus on any sound in particular. You don't have to search out sounds. Just actively listen right now. Even if what's coming in is silence. And when the mind wanders, you return to listening. If you happen to have a sound in your environment, I'd now like you to focus on the sound and notice, if you can, the first moment you're aware of the sound, and there's a moment of what I would call raw data or raw data, depending how you pronounce it, the raw information. But notice how the very next instance, you've labeled what the sound is. Notice the very next moment, there's an identifying, a labeling, sometimes a judging. Just observe that process. See if you can find that first moment where you haven't yet identified the sound. So you might hear some kind of motor, for instance, something, a whirring in the distance. Suddenly, it becomes car driving up the street. But a moment before that, it was sound, unidentified. Just notice that aspect of the mind as you do this with sound, the aspect of the mind that knows, that labels. And then slowly bring your awareness back to your sitting in your space. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. Just observe anything arising in your mind. I want to suggest the next general antidote just in general to countering negative mind states is being non-judgmental. And it's helpful sometimes. I notice how I'm using one of the sense faculties, sound, hearing, how we can hear it, see it more with sound. It comes in, we first don't know what it is, then we identify, labeling immediately. And then judgments also happen. And we have a lot of judgments with our visual consciousness when we see things, when we taste things, smell things, touch things. And all of this is in relation to how we are with ourselves and others. And so again, in general, you may notice that you have a tendency to like certain thoughts and emotions that are arising in your mind, and you dislike other thoughts and emotions that are arising in your mind. And what it does is when the negative thoughts and emotions arise in your mind, we learn a pattern to judge ourselves. I'm not supposed to be thinking this thought. I'm a Buddhist nun. I shouldn't ever get angry or sad or whatever else, whatever off balance experience. I'm not a good person because I had this thought about that person. That. So the helpful thing is the awareness, to start with mindfulness and awareness, as we mentioned as the first general antidote to negative emotion, is you just watch what's arising and you start practicing. It's just another thought. And also look at all the airtime, the attention you give to all the negative aspects of yourself. Many people are very geared that way. It courts low self-esteem, and it comes from low self-esteem. So we have to start taking care because we're okay. We're really fundamentally okay, fundamentally good for sure. But then you have these negative thoughts and, oh, as a Buddhist, I shouldn't be thinking that. Shouldn't be thinking that. Okay. But the thought just came up and it's only there because it's a habit, because there was previous instances of that in the mind. And I'm a bit more habituated with those negative thoughts and tendencies. And if you start layering more heaviness on yourself, that I'm a negative person because I'm thinking these things, it makes it worse. So the beginning is just to become aware, wow, I have so many negative critical thoughts, or I have so many depressed thoughts or anxious thoughts. That's not the whole picture of who you are. It's just a habit. It's just a rut you've kind of created by thinking and thinking and thinking in that way. So we want to retrain in Buddhism. That's what we're doing. We're retraining to think more positive things. So what I find helpful with the judgmental thoughts, emotions, is the beginning is you just start to watch them and try to and watch even the layer of I'm not good enough. And I let that bubble float off more and more. And I pop it sometimes. Bubbles have no essence. And when you really notice what's a thought and where does a thought come from, the thought has no more essence than what we make it. Okay. And I'll just give an example. For some of you who have raised children and may have had teenagers at some point, I have friends with teenagers. I have friends with older children, like grown children. But with teenagers, and when they get into a certain age, I'll say between the ages of 13 and 16, as you know, sometimes a little bit before or after, but there seems to be a habit that they learn from school, they learn from behavior of things, they learn from other friends, they learn from what they watch on social media. So if they lose their phone, for instance, okay, there becomes hysteria with some teenagers, and it becomes a huge drama. And they learn this either from a parent that does this, they mirror that, or a friend that does it. Okay. So the more you can work with them of there's no drama, there's no emergency here, right? So we're rebalancing the picture. I give an example. I live in a lovely little community with a number of children, school-age children. They're very lovely, the kids. And one of them I'm very close with, and she's almost 9 going on 36, if you know what I mean. And there's a lot of drama. And she's a great kid. There's no question. And she's got great parents, right? But I see the drama, and sometimes I'm outside now that it's nicer, and I'm outside and I'm close with her parents, and we'll be sitting out there and I'll see her come outside and I can see the thing, the drill, hands on hips, and there becomes some demanding words out of her mouth, and there's a big interruption to anything anybody else is talking about. And I can see, and then when the parents say something to her, I see her kind of tune out and kind of make a face because she lives with them all the time. So they have, the kids and parents have that dynamic. So when I'm kind of quietly with her alone, or she'll come over if I'm gardening, and then she starts with something, and I'll say, well, you know, that's not really a big deal. Or wouldn't it be more peaceful for your mind if you thought that that was really okay, that your friend said that, or, you know, having you lose this thing wasn't really that big of a deal, was it? And then she'll think, and she'll go, no. And I'll go, well, how come you acted like that? And how come you yelled at your mom? And then she thinks about it and she goes, I know, I couldn't control myself. So you're cutting off the pattern. You're showing them there's other coping mechanisms. A lot of us haven't learned that when we were younger, so we're learning it now. Same as adults is you yourself have to get strong with your mind and notice, where does that thought come from? Why do I have that negative thought? Why am I hysterical right now and out of balance? So let me give you an emergency, okay? For me, again, everyone has different levels. An emergency for me is blood is spurting out of somebody's aorta uncontrollably. That's an emergency that needs to be dealt with right away. Okay. It doesn't mean you need to be hysterical when you call 911. Okay. Because that can make it worse. And that makes your mind cloudy, not the clear lake, but my mind is gutted with like, I don't know what to do. You call 911, right? But so many of our things can be put in perspective. As I mentioned last week, the first pillar of joy is perspective, as we did from the other class we were doing. Again, perspective lends a lot of space. And I can say, okay, many of the things going on, of those bubbles rising up in our mind, are not emergencies. They don't need to create anxiety. The reason they do is because I've got a pattern of anxiety in my mind. I have a pattern of telling myself, oh, I need to be anxious about this. This is anxiety causing. I have to feel anxious because I always feel anxious. I have to court depression because that's what I'm used to doing. And part of it is you're telling yourself, I'm an anxious person. I'm a depressed person. I'm an angry person. No, you just might have a lot of that in your mind. That's all. Let it go. Deep breath. Feel the grounding of the roots of Mother Earth. I'm okay. And start creating more I'm okay. I might be feeling a little bit anxious right now. I might be feeling a lot anxious. I don't need to judge myself. Fundamentally, I'm okay. Just having a really hard time right now. Yep, that's okay because you're a human being. However, because you have Buddha nature, every being with a mind has Buddha nature. Doesn't mean you're a Buddha. What it means is you have a potential, again, you have a potential to ripen into a fully enlightened being, free of all fear, fully manifest wisdom, compassion, loving kindness, like that. Okay. But you might say, well, right now I'm having a really hard time, feeling really emotional, feeling really off balance. Okay. It's just simply a habit, a pattern that I've created by feeling that and getting into it a lot. But I'm going to tell myself, because I put in nature, you have to do this internally. You might want to look in the mirror and say it out loud a few times. No problem. Say it to yourself without looking in a mirror. I know I'm having an anxious moment. I'm having a full-blown panic attack. You know, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I deserve goodness. I am worthy, right? Oh, whatever positive things you want to start to create that airtime to take control of your mind. You just haven't balanced it. And all you've done is courted all the negative emotions and let those like a tidal wave wash over you. That fills your whole being with that. So we're just rebalancing. I'm just rebalancing and working on being non-judgmental, non-judgmental. First, it's nice to do the sound meditation, to just notice how I identify, how the mind knows certain things. And let's look a little bit more at judgment, okay? And judgment leads us to attachment and grasping. You like this, you want more of that, so I grab onto that. I don't want any of that, I don't like that. Aversion, rejection. When your mind is experiencing that, there's no peace in your mind. Totally out of balance. Back and forth we go from things like that. Okay. So, what about cultivating a sense of equanimity? Equanimity, a non judgmental, loving awareness and acceptance of whatever rises in your mind. Acceptance is a big word, but again, a non judgmental, loving awareness and acceptance of whatever arises in your mind. Think of that. Slowly we start. Slowly we start. Okay. So again, watching, I'm starting to should on myself. We might say, oh, I should be better. I'm a Buddhist. I shouldn't think that thought. I watch it, catch it, pop the bubble if you like, or let the bubble just float off. Yes, that is one thought. Oh, there goes another thought just like it, and another thought. I'm just habituated to thinking that way. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm trying right now. In fact, I'm watching my mind, whether it's negative or not. That's exciting. Most of the planet is not able to watch their minds and not interested in doing it. So you're doing it. Give yourself some credit. Okay. With loving awareness, maybe you put your hand on your heart for a moment, right? I'm okay. I'm a good person. I'm a good person. Okay. You're part of Tupten Norbeling, or you found this teaching via Zoom and you're participating. Well, good for you. Do you ever give yourself credit for that? Good for you. You could be watching some garbage TV show right now, but you're not. Give yourself credit for that loving awareness, right? I'm okay, right? I'd like myself to be happy. That's okay. No problem. And sometimes we need that self-compassion directed towards ourselves. And then acceptance. Acceptance, whatever arises in my mind. Well, I'm a human being, not a Buddha. I'm a human being. And again, I don't know your experience because I don't know your mind, but I'm a human being. And the nature of being a human means I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to think some negative, judgmental thoughts about myself and about others. That's just the nature of being human, right? And I accept that sometimes I have thoughts like that, but I don't allow them to go on for too long anymore. I watch them, let them go more quickly and go, okay. Now here's an example. We judge others because we judge ourselves. It all starts with that experience with ourselves. Okay? Look at the sweeping judgments we layer on others as well. Usually comes from a place of dissatisfaction in ourselves. That's all. So I acknowledge that and say, yeah, I haven't fully woken up yet, not a Buddha yet. So occasionally I get stuck in an old pattern or a habit. I get hooked by it, and that rut sometimes is very deep. So as I'm on my path to enlightenment, sometimes I slip and I fall into the rut. That's all. Again, the famous exercise, again, just to repeat, and I think I mentioned this last week. I'm teaching a number of courses right now. Sometimes I forget when I spoke of something. Please refresh me if I mention to you the book, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. Have any of you read that book? Okay, it's well worth reading. It's well worth reading, by Sogyal Rinpoche. It came out many years ago, and many of us read it. I remember when Lama Zopa Rinpoche was reading it, and there's a one page in there about practice. So think about this. There's one page in there. This is our practice. This is our life as a spiritual practitioner, I would say. Okay? And what it gives you examples. I walk down the street. There's a really, really big hole in the street. I don't see it. I fall into it. I have a really, really hard time getting out. I finally get out. I continue down the street. Scenario number 2. I walk down the same street. There's a really big hole in the street. I see the hole. I fall into it again. It's still difficult to get out, but I'm able to get out a little bit more quickly, and I continue down the street. Scenario number 3. I walk down the same street. I see a really big hole in the ground. I go around it, and I continue down the same street. And scenario 4 is I choose another street. That's our practice. That's how we practice. So every time you fall in the hole, what's the point of beating yourself up and making it worse? Figure out how to get out and figure out how to get out more and more quickly each time. That's our spiritual path. And eventually you're going to choose another street that doesn't have a hole, doesn't have the ruts. Okay? That's our practice. We try our best. That's all you can do as a human, is to try your best. Okay. So when you have equanimity, this equal regard, first of all, we're going to try to cultivate it for ourselves, but because then it will come out for others. Having the equal regard, equal respect and acceptance, loving awareness for all other beings as well. And if we're not practicing it with ourselves, it can get really challenging with other beings. Because from our lack of acceptance of something in ourselves, from our misery, our off balance, then I'm going to hurl it out there like that. It often happens like that. And so let's just think about sometimes external judgment towards others, how it works. Because this often has people out of balance and has them anxious, depressed about themselves. You know, and the pandemic has wreaked a lot of havoc in ways. But just looking at how we engage with people, some of us are starting to move around a little bit, seeing other people. We certainly see people on Zoom. And just looking how we do. So I think I've mentioned this in other classes before. If you ever notice before the pandemic, did you ever notice an evening you were going to meet some people at a party, at a restaurant, at a dinner, at a function somewhere? You were meeting friends, or you were going to somebody's wedding. I don't know if any of these things, and what happens is you were excited to go. You were looking forward to it. So you get dressed and this is your evening out, great. Maybe you're going with someone, it doesn't matter. And you enter the function, a house, a restaurant, a venue, it doesn't matter. You enter the function. I don't know if this is related to any of you. Okay. And there's a lot of people milling around, talking, drinking, eating. Okay. You walk in, you're all great, got my makeup on, feeling really good. You cruise in, and then across the room, you see kind of an acquaintance, somebody you know. There's all these other people you don't know, but there's somebody, a little bit of a distance. They're talking to somebody you notice, and they glance over at you, right? They see you. There's like quick eye contact, but they don't stop or wave or try to come over to you, and they go right back to having their conversation. What do you do with that information? How are you doing? Did we talk about this before? Okay. How's that going for you? What does your mind tell you? Anything? And the person doesn't smile at you. They just glance over and they go back to their conversation. Please, Julie.
I think I would just immediately go to like what I did wrong, or did they not see me? Am I making things up? I think I would spiral a little bit about why I hadn't been acknowledged properly, like in the polite way.
Okay.
That I was expecting.
Thank you. Anybody feel the same way as Julie? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? So what's interesting is, and I'm just picking on Julie, and Barbara raised her hand. And so what's interesting is you simply walked in the door. You're fine. A moment ago, you were fine, right? Looking forward, right? Moment ago. You're the same person now on the other side of the door. Why is something suddenly wrong with you? Because of one glance, right? And you might even insinuate this person has a little bit of power over you, or you feel they're somebody you want to talk to that's important to you. It's so interesting. Now, here's the thing is, we glom a whole level of stuff on, but you don't know what's going on. But we've judged, we've loaded up the whole scene, and immediately we don't feel good. A lot of people don't feel good. So please check what's happening. Okay. Now here's Barbara's got her hand up. Barbara, please.
I was going to say, to me, I would have a choice. I could take it personally and feel rejected, or I could say there's probably 100 reasons why she could have done that, and she has no idea how it made me feel.
Right. Okay, so it needs analysis is what I'm saying. So again, analysis can happen formally in our meditation practice, privately with ourselves. When there's more analysis happening, meaning in that analysis of proper meditation, and there's many meditations, as we know, but in analyses that get me to feeling good about myself with self-compassion practices, loving kindness practices, meditating on the Lam Rim, learning how to meditate, all these things start to give you confidence and stability in yourself that, I'm trying the best I can. That's all I can do. I can't do anymore. If somebody doesn't like me, I'm sorry for that. It's karma. And I will make sure that I didn't disturb them and upset them and apologize for if anything I did do. But sometimes you don't even know somebody and they don't like you. I can't help that except by having good conduct right now and continuing to realize I'm giving it my best shot. That's the best I can do. So the more that I layer that on in my life and in my practice, I walk into the party now, not doing any formal analysis, not meditating because I'm active. They glance over at me, they look away, they don't smile, they don't wave, right? And immediately I might feel a little dart. Oh, right? But I don't have to take it personally. So thank you, Barbara, for mentioning there's times it's like, why do I need to take it personally? I have no idea what's going on for that person, but I've just lobbed a whole thing on them because it's got to be about me. It's always about us, isn't it? People are too busy thinking about themselves to think about you, by the way. Free yourself from that notion. Okay? Now here's the scenarios that you don't know. You don't know the story going on over there. Please check the story. But your mind starts a story. Okay? If you're feeling really lousy about yourself, right? Where lousy feelings start with is self-cherishing. So they've got to be thinking about me. It's got to be about me. And I guess they don't like me because they would have smiled. It's got to be about me. They don't like me. I'm a terrible. Whoa, stop that story. Is that accurate? Not at all. You're a bad person? No. Do you have negative mind states sometimes? Of course. That's the nature of being a human. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person, especially because I'm looking at it, I'm trying to meditate and I'm trying to be aware. I'm working on it. Okay. So you walk into the party now with your human state, doing all its stuff, and there's a lot of distractions and people you want to see, and you're looking over at the food table and you want to drink, and there's your person. They look over, they glance, no smile, no wave. Okay, here's some scenarios. They may be engaged in a conversation with someone that they are uncomfortable with, and they want out of there, and they don't know how to get out of that conversation. They're stuck, like, and they can't really wait. They're afraid to even wave or smile at someone because some people perceive that as rude. Oh, you're not listening to me right now. Not focusing on our conversation. And the other person, not taking it personally, they look over at you. They may be very happy to see you and want to talk to you later and have an intention that they're going to make their way over to you later when they're finished this conversation. But it might be a very important conversation that they really want to give their undivided attention to. Good for them. You're going to be there at the party. They're going to find you later. Great. I can go enjoy. Oh, there's so-and-so. I'll make my way over to them later. Great. Okay. Now here's another thing. Use humor. You don't know if that person looks over at you. They're in this conversation. You don't know if they have gas right now. So they look over, who knows what is going on for them. But we assume a whole level of stuff. It's not accurate. You don't know what's in their mind. But we're putting stuff in their mind that is simply not true. So, and then check yourself. A moment before I entered the door to this function, I was so fine. I thought I looked good. I was excited. I was really looking forward to this night out and the party or the restaurant or whatever. And a moment later, you step through the door and you glance over at one person and you're a mess now. You're the same person just came through the door. That was fine. So remember that I'm the same person. I'll check in later with that person. Like I notice a little dart. Let me be aware of that and say, you know what? A moment ago, I was fine. I'm the same person. I'm a good person. I'll check in. And you can even recall a little bit, was there anything I did to harm that person? No, why am I taking it personally? And slowly off you go into who else you want to see or meet at the party. But we do this a lot. We have these sweeping judgments. We project stories onto ourselves and others and scenarios. You have to keep poking. Is the story accurate? Your story may have a valid perspective. The valid perspective is, I see the person I know over there and they're not waving or smiling at me. Okay, and they're in a conversation with someone. Well, that's valid. You're seeing that, you're experiencing that. But the fact that they don't like you, they never want to talk to you again, you're a horrible person, is that accurate? So you have to keep poking, and until you have a direct perception of emptiness, the nature of reality. We did narrative therapy when I was the director of Vajrapani, a therapy around what's your story? And we did it with a Buddhist therapist for 4 years. Anyone that lived on the property could participate. It was very intense and it was wonderful stuff. And we learned that until you have a direct perception of emptiness or the nature of reality, your story is always wrong. I found that so liberating. So I could watch now my story going, and I didn't have to get as involved. I'd be like, oh, there goes the story. Look, and sometimes the story is a sweeping saga, right? Oh my goodness. Casts of thousands, an MGM grand spectacle, but I could not be as involved, and I could just kind of quickly watch it and be like, well, boy, is that a tale you have about that person based on the last time you see them? And I could just quickly let it wash away, float off, and just be back to, here I am at the function, right? Are we communicating? So I find it, for me personally, a really helpful way of this, looking at the judgments, looking at the sweeping judgments. Here's another thing. Some people have a mind with judgments that really likes to have negative criticism about others. They're just directed that way from based on their environment, people that have influenced them, how they're raised. And they see people and all they see first is the negative about the person over and over and over. And they have a pattern of that in their mind. Their minds are often not that happy. They see that. And so what I've noticed to do, if it's somebody else in my space that's doing it a lot, negative judgment, negative criticism, there's some people that like to go on and on talking negatively about people like that. I've learned a few things, is either to gently interrupt the conversation. And sometimes I've been like, excuse me, I just really need to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Off I go. When I come back, I can sometimes insert some new dialogue. Maybe they've forgotten what they're talking about. Sometimes I've actually interrupted. And if it's somebody, depending on the relationship, if I'm close with them, I've actually said, I'm not really comfortable with what you're talking about with this person. Can we talk about something else? And occasionally when they paused, I've added in something positive about the person that they're trashing. Found some positive spin on it like that, and redirected the conversation that way, or interrupted with a new topic of conversation. So those are ways, because those influences do wash over you and start having you thinking, oh, negative things. And it influences some people a lot. Some of us are very impressionable like that. And then if you're noticing it's your own mind doing the sweeping judgments, is I practiced with myself over years because I was raised very much like that, right? And I had a lot of imprints of that. And I learned that to train myself is I'd watch the sweeping negative story about someone. I wouldn't act on it or say anything. And then I'd say, well, okay, now is our time. Like we see that thought. Okay, now's our time to have a positive thought about them. In fact, you're going to have 2 positive thoughts for every negative you had about them. And that started to really shift my mind, where I stopped having the negative thoughts for the most part. So again, exercise, training, and you have to participate in it if you want to shift those things for yourself. I know it's not easy sometimes. Sometimes it's just all falling apart. And okay, so I realize this is going quickly. Please, any questions right now? And I did have some comments I just wanted to add. You can also comment on from last week. If you had any questions about the meditation on the clear lake, or the meditation on, letting the breath breathe you and noticing sound, the one we did today. And then, have you had any look at what prevents you from practicing? I mentioned that a little bit last week. And we were talking about using openness and curiosity, moving in closely, metaphorically, when you're meeting someone you don't like or a situation you don't like. Getting curious about, why is this delusion arising right now in my mind in relation to this person or situation? Why is my mind disturbed right now? I don't know if you've had a little look this past week. And maybe any control issues that have been going on for you that are causing suffering. So, but any questions, anything like that, please. Julie, please.
I just had a comment about last week. I've worn a Apple Watch or a Fitbit for several years now, and I just started wearing like a regular watch, and that was a huge help because you had talked last week about how distracted we are generally, and I had just had a lot of thought about after that class about how much kind of, I don't know, but it kind of like every time there's a text, it pops up. Every time there's a my phone app says something, it pops up. So I wondered if that might help me, and it was huge in terms of just my stress level. I noticed, it's not like anybody's texting me about like emergencies or anything, but just setting the phone aside and grabbing it, checking if there's anything, and then back down, rather than it kind of interrupting the time I have I have a 2-year-old. So, interrupting the time I'm spending with him, or, if I'm chatting with my wife or something, rather than having it interrupt that and that constant kind of checking, setting the phone in the bedroom, and then having evenings and really just focusing was just huge. It was a big help. So I'm happy that.
Well, I'd say I salute you. Thank you. I say good for you, because it's interesting, really powerful. Thank you so much for doing that, because I know so many people with Fitbits and Apple Watches, and I guess there's some interesting things they do. But, a lot of people with this whole notion of how many steps did you take? If you go out on an average and walk for an hour and a half, that's 10,000 steps. You got it. It doesn't change that much day to day. You know how long you're walking and how much you need to exercise. And so, do I need this thing on my wrist constantly that I'm, walking up and down the steps in the house? I did. You get an idea after a couple of days. And the Apple Watches with the constant, my goodness, like, it's one thing to have the device here, but to have it attached to you, like, soon we're going to have chips in our head. I mean, seriously, we will. And so again, I think it's refreshing to hear you say that. Thank you. But you notice right away, you go, wow, it really does work. So again, there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. It's our attachment of how much it's interfering and invading our mental space. And I just find that it does. Everybody's got their own take on it, though. Some people, maybe not that much. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Very impressed. Especially that it works, Yeah. So 2 things with meditation. Emotions coming to the surface during meditation that I found surprising and overwhelming, and not being able to control the negative thoughts. So it's a control issue for you. So Brian, great, you keep on. We have to keep on with it. Again, none of these things disappear in 2 weeks or 2 years. And it all depends as well. We all have different levels of how deep the negativities run and disturbing emotions. Some people have a lighter level, some people have a really deep level. Chronic depression is really heavy for people and things. So you just keep working with it. And roughly, I'm just picking on Brian right now. How long have you been around Buddhism, roughly?
I really started my search about 9 months to a year ago.
Okay, so I'm going to say relatively newer student, but we don't know for Brian in his mind stream how many lifetimes of practice he's been doing. Like, it definitely, the imprints are there, but when you're a newer student, and I'm just kind of labeling it that keep at it, Brian, because it takes a lot of time to train the mind, and you've started. You're doing it. I totally commend you. It's fantastic. Rejoice at what you are doing rather than getting stuck in these emotions are still arising, but we also have to be realistic and patient with ourselves. So what I do find interesting is when a student will come to me after 2 years or 3 years and say, well, I'm doing the meditations for 2 or 3 years, and they're around 40 years old. Okay. So 2 or 3 years, they get it going. They're doing it pretty well, pretty consistently. And you think that in 2 or 3 years, it's suddenly going to change and you're going to be a Buddha when you had, 30 years of doing it a different way. So we have to be skillful and patient and realistic with ourselves. And that's a really big part of the practice. This is the long view. Let's take the long view. We need to have the long view that I am making imprints for future lives. I'm making imprints for future lives. And if this life can just evolve a little bit like this much, it's not that you don't have a big, nice view, but if I have the expectation, I'll just be disappointed. But if I can just improve a little bit more and more and more, and I have all these lives and each one gets a little bit better, I'll get to enlightenment. I'll get there. But that patience is really important for yourself. And you're living in America. I know you're not an American by birth, but this is a very impatient culture. I find of all the cultures I teach in, Americans wanted their enlightenment wrapped up in a nice little silver package 2 weeks ago. We have no patience with it. So please relax in your practice. It's very important to relax and just go, hey, I'm starting to look at my mind. That's pretty exciting, frankly. So thank you for doing that, Brian. And again, you're doing great. You're doing great. Let me just take a couple, and Barbara, I saw your hand up. Bob, being quiet is more of a challenge lately as I'm in the process of grieving. Yes. And Brian, you're 58. Please give yourself a break. Like, you're doing great, like fantastic. And don't feel like you got to it too late. One of the best practitioners I know started when he was 65. Great guy. Practiced for 20 years until he passed away. Wonderful man. If you're grieving, do give yourself the space and time. It's really, really important. Things are going to change in life. We have many events. So Bob, of course, it's going to be more challenging when you're grieving, and you need to give yourself the space to grieve. So sometimes in meditation, you be there with the grieving, like you realize, wow, I'm just really sad right now. That's sometimes when you're grieving the best it's going to be. And also grief comes in waves. So I notice, first there's the very heavy grief in the beginning of a great loss of a loved one. And it's just, you're overwhelmed. And then slowly there might be a day where, I got out of bed and I can kind of see the sun a little bit today. I'm not really happy. I'm going through the motions, depending on the type of loss, and slowly. But I also notice, especially with traumatic deaths, sudden deaths of suicide. But 5 years later, this may seem like a long time. 5 years later, some people I know that went through very dramatic deaths of a loved one, where 5 years later, there was this turning point, and suddenly they were saying, well, I think I had my first okay day. I think I had my first day that I was just not completely mired in sadness. So it's a process. It's a process. And one last comment. I know we're running out of time. Barbara, please, you had your hand
I was
up.
just going to share that when I get really negative, sometimes I have negative thoughts. I did for years. I still have them sometimes. If I get them and I can't seem to shake them, a guy taught me this. He said to think of it as glasses. You're looking through colored glasses. Those glasses have depression printed on them. And if you can think about it physically, sometimes it helps you to realize that it's not yourself. It's something that is changing your view. And that really helped me not make myself depressed about being depressed.
Yes. Yes. And also knowing it's simply karmic seeds ripening that are causing you to happen to choose those glasses that day. Like eventually the glasses will be clear. Eventually you won't even need glasses, right? Or the ones you're choosing to put on are the rosy ones that make everything beautiful when you practice Tantra, like that, you know? So again, so it's really nice to think about. I love that analogy of the glasses. What we're looking through is that guise of our karma, our karmic imprints.
Mhm.
Exactly. And you can just watch and go, you know, and there's days you're in a bad mood and you got the bad mood glasses on. And some days I go, yeah, you know, it's just, this is today. But tomorrow, everything's impermanent. So there's a good chance tomorrow I may have different glasses on, if any at all. So that's very helpful. Thank you. So I want to close there on that note. And what I'd like you to do this week, please, before we dedicate, is I want you to look at your stories and judgments. I want you to just see what gets activated in your mind. And then the other thing I want you to do is when you look at what gets activated in your mind, we've talked a lot about different delusions. And I want you to try to practice the non-judgmental, loving awareness, accepting space towards yourself and others as much as you can, slowly, slowly, right? But as you start to notice the delusions in your mind, I want you to choose one or two. What are your biggest ones? And we're going to start in the last couple sessions working with specific delusions. How do we counter those? What are the antidotes? So I would like to close with dedicating. Thank you so much for joining. I also want to mention, I'd like to dedicate to our being able to really start to look at our delusions realistically and patiently, kindly, okay? Because what we're trying to do is we're going to transform these delusions ultimately through our practice, and that's going to help us reach that state of full awareness, full enlightenment, actually, where all of the positive qualities are manifest in us, like loving kindness, wisdom, and compassion. But the real reason we're doing it is to be of the most benefit to all living beings. So I'd really like to dedicate our energy to that.